Hello everybody, it's Paul Laski here with Icon Collective, and today I want to show you another Ableton Live trick. This is a way that we can use Live's audio effect racks to start to split the frequency bands of a particular sound or timbre, and this is going to allow us to process different frequency bands independently. This is great, for instance, if you have maybe a bass sound or a pad sound and you want to apply something like, in my example, I'm going to show you a chorus effect, which is going to widen up and fatten up the sound. But what I want to do is I want to leave my low end nice and mono. I don't necessarily want the low end to be spread out or chorused, but I want the rest of the sound to be. So what I'm going to do is show you how you can quickly set up an effect rack to split the frequency bands of a sound, and we can start to process them independently. So let's get started. So in my live set over here, I've loaded up a few drum clips, one with no kick, because you need to have one with no kick, and one that's full on. Full groove. And I've also recorded in just a really basic pad chord. And because I'm a sucker for sidechain compression, I set up a compressor on the pad. And I've also set up a ghost kick, which I'm using just to trigger that sidechain compressor. But what I want to do is, this is a nice pad, and I'm using Silent for this particular sound, but it's kind of thin sounding, so I want to fatten it up a little bit. So what I'm going to do is go into Live's browser, and from the audio effects section, I'm just going to grab an empty audio effect rack, and I'll drop it onto the track before the sidechain compressor. What I also want to do, now that I've got this blank rack, is open up the chain viewer, this button right here. And I want to create a couple of blank chains, and I can do that by right-clicking or control-clicking anywhere where it says drop audio effects here, and I'm going to select create chain. For this example, I think I'm going to create 2, but feel free to create as many as you need. And what I'm going to do now is I have 2 separate chains, and what these are essentially doing is taking the audio from this pad instrument that's playing back on the Silent here. It's taking that audio and it's splitting it into 2 separate chains, so I'm essentially parallel processing it. And right now, if I were to play it back, I'm just hearing 2 copies of that signal, and it sounds a lot louder. But let's start to process these independently. So what I'm going to do is on each of the chains, I'm going to use Ableton Live's EQ3 effect. I'm going to drop one on each of these chains. And let's rename the chains. Because this bottom chain, I want it to just process low frequencies, let's rename it to low. And let's click on the top chain. I'm going to press the Command R key command, and let's call this mids and highs. Cool. So what I want to do is use the EQ3s to isolate just specific frequency bands. So on this low chain, what I want to do is click on the EQ3, and I want to mute out my mid frequencies and my high frequencies. And just as a visual aid for myself, I like to pull the volumes of these down as well. Just so when I click on this chain, I can quickly see, okay, there's nothing coming from those 2 particular frequency bands, the mid band and the high band. And I'm going to go up to the mids and highs chain, and I'm going to do just the opposite here. So I'm going to mute out the lows, turn the volume all the way down of those. Now if I play it back, it sounds more or less the same as it did with and without the audio effect rack. One thing I do want to point out on the EQ3, it's very important that you're using it in what's called flat response mode, and this is something that's kind of hidden. But if you control-click on the name of the effect, EQ3 here, you can see there's an option in this context menu that's labeled flat response. We want to make sure that that is turned on. I can tell it's turned on because I've got the check mark right there. That way it's not going to color the sound at all. It's not going to boost the gain of the signal. So you want to make sure that is on. So again, our pad sounds more or less the same with and without this effect rack. So big whoop. What are we going to do with it next? So let's turn it back on. And because I want the low frequencies to remain mono, and you can see I've got a mono signal here, the same thing is happening on the left and right. I want those low frequencies to stay mono, and I want the mids and highs to get chorused out and spread in the stereo field and sound nice and fat. So let's do this. Let's grab Live's chorus effect from the audio effects, and let's drop it onto this first chain. You can see it pops up after the EQ3. So essentially, this chain is only passing the mid and high frequencies from this sound, and only those mid and high frequencies are getting the effect of the chorus. Let's set a couple of things up here. This built-in high pass on the chorus, I'm just going to turn that all the way down. I want the full frequency of the sound. And let's hear how it sounds now. If we need to make any changes to the chorus, we can. Let's play it with the drums too. Turn up the dry wet for a more dramatic chorus effect. And let's bypass the effect rack. So quite a dramatic difference we're hearing. Sounds much wider, much fatter, but my low end is nice and mono. And if I solo that, I can hear my low frequencies staying nice and mono in the stereo field while my mids and highs are panned out nicely, detuned nicely. Another quick thing I want to point out is that each of these EQ3s has a dial called frequency low, and this is going to set your low frequency cutoff point. So if I want more mid-range frequencies to pass through my mids and highs, for instance, all I need to do is adjust the frequency low on each of the EQ3s in each of the chains. So let's say I want to bring that frequency low cutoff point to maybe 100 hertz. So I can just type that value in here. I just clicked right below the dial. I'm going to type in 100 and hit enter. Just make sure you do the same setting on both of your EQ3s. Now only frequencies 100 hertz and below are staying mono, but everything else is being panned out. It might also be a good idea to open up your macro controls and maybe set up or macro map these frequency low dials to one single macro control. Let's just do that really quickly. I'm going to engage the map function. I'm going to click frequency low on my first chain, my mids and highs. Let's click map to macro 1, and let's do the same exact thing on my low chain. Let's map it to macro 1. Now I can turn off map mode, and now I can use this low frequency crossover point, this macro control I've created, to control the frequency low dial on both of the EQ3s. You can hear how this is again sort of thinning the sound out as I'm letting more dry frequencies pass through on my low chain versus my mids and highs chain. In addition, you can also create 3 chains if you want to be very specific and separate each frequency, low, mid, and high. And you can then EQ these separately, you can process them separately. I can compress my low end differently from my mid and my high. So lots of flexibility here just by using one single effect rack. So I hope you guys have enjoyed this. Take this technique, use it to get your sound sounding fatter and cleaner at the same time. Enjoy it, and thanks for watching.